everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Frugal Noodle, the podcast dedicated to helping you understand money, finance, retirement, early or otherwise. And in today's episode, what is the 401k and what is the stock exchange? Let's start with the 401k, a retirement account offered by many employers that allows an employee to contribute pre-tax dollars to their retirement fund. That was simple, right? On to the stock market. I'm just kidding. Let's talk about 401k some more. I've talked about it in season 1, but let's revisit the subject and get a little more in depth. 401k started back in 1978 when Congress passed the Revenue Act, which included the provision provided for the Internal Revenue Code, which granted employees the opportunity to defer compensation before being taxed. That provision was Section 401k, hence the name. This was jostled about for a few years until about 1981 when the IRS implemented rules that allowed an employee to fund a retirement account through payroll deductions. But before it gained the popularity it holds today, it was a benefits consultant by the name of Ted Benna, who in 1980 was seeking to design a tax-friendly retirement account for employees at a client company. His proposal was declined by the client, but his idea was implemented at his own company, which was the first company to provide the 401k to workers. By 1984, more than half of all large companies had either implemented or at least considered implementing the 401k for their employees. So how has it changed over the years? Well, there's many ways it has, but the most common way it changes from year to year is the maximum pre-tax money an employee can defer to their account. And what does it look like now? Well, as of 2022, you can now contribute a maximum of $20,500 of your pre-tax income toward your 401k. The two most common forms of 401k are the traditional and Roth 401ks. The only distinction between the two is that with a traditional 401k, your contributions are pre-tax now, but taxed later when you begin to withdraw. With a 401k, you pay the taxes now and are not taxed later when you begin to withdraw. Also, if you withdraw from your 401k too early, you will be penalized around 10% on top of what you're being taxed. There are certain circumstances where this penalty can be waived, but you can begin withdrawing from your 401k penalty-free once you hit 59 and a half years old. But at that time, you will begin to be taxed for your contributions in a traditional 401k setup. The future of the 401k is unsure. The question comes into play when pondered alongside other retirement plans like Social Security, which is always rumored to be obsolete in the future. In which case, there's the suggestion that the 401k may become a mandatory enrollment for employees due to the fact that Social Security won't be there for them. One thing that we can be certain of is that the 401k will likely only increase in the maximum contribution one can make due to inflation, and that the age when withdrawals will go unpenalized can certainly increase or decrease, although it's more likely to do the former. So how should you approach the 401k? Well, I can't tell you that, but my approach to the 401k is to get as near to maxing it as possible, if not maxing it. But at a very minimum, I have always made sure to take advantage of the employer match. If that's 0.5% or 10%, it doesn't matter. That's essentially extra salary you can get out of your employer, and you should certainly try to do so. Now let's talk about stocks and the stock market. The stock market, or markets that resembles today's stock market, are suggested to have begun back in the 1400s in Antwerp, which is now Belgium today. This is where international trade between merchants took place, exchanging goods for currency or barter with the notion that they would net a profit if they held onto the goods and sold them in the future. In the late 1970s, a group called the Buttonwood Tree Agreement would meet daily to trade stocks and bonds, which is the practice that eventually formed the New York Stock Exchange. As time went on, the New York Stock Exchange began to populate with the shares of publicly traded companies as stocks. Then, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was born in 1896, which was made up of 12 components of mainly industrial companies. In 1923, the S&P 500 was added to the New York Stock Exchange, only 6 years before the fateful crash that was the result of a decade of speculators making leveraged bets on the stock market. Thus, inflating prices and causing the Great Depression. It would take 10 years for us to get through and begin recovering from the crash of 1929. NASDAQ, the National Association of Securities Dealers Automated Quotations, was formed as its own stock exchange. In 1987, the stock market experienced a sudden and severe crash known as Black Monday, which took 2 years to recover from and surpass those pre-crash highs. So how have stocks changed over the years? Where stocks started as the purchase of a physical good at one price, only to sell it at a higher price elsewhere or later, it turned into buying shares of a company or organization, which for a while did still mean purchasing a physical stock certificate. From the 1600s until about 1990s, that's when the electronic entry systems replaced physical certs. Though the last physical certificate was issued in 2013 for a purchase in Walt Disney stock. So how does the average person engage in the stock market and stocks today? Well, if you have a 401k or an IRA, then you do participate in the stock market in some of the more indirect ways you can. Your money you save in those accounts is reinvested by experts who work to make sure your money is growing as you work toward retirement. But a lot of people have jumped on the investing bandwagon and started their own accounts with companies like Vanguard, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, or even Robinhood. Robinhood is arguably the easiest one to jump in on and get a user-friendly feel for how it all works, but they're the last place I'll work with after their blatant manipulation during the beginning of the GameStop and AMC saga. The other companies, though, will give you a feel for how the market works with good insights to keep you informed on your portfolio. Stocks and investing in general is essentially gambling. You're putting up money that you can lose every dollar of, and in some forms of trading, you can end up owing money, such as in the cases of options, which are basically ways of saying, I think this stock will go up this much or down this much, and if it does, I want to make this much. Only if it doesn't do what you're predicting it will, you will end up owing money. Some people have entered these kinds of engagements with less than $1,000 to their name and end up owning their brokerage tens of thousands of dollars. It's a way to play with more money than you have by borrowing from the brokerage you're working with. I've never done it, and I likely never will. If you're curious about how the stock market works and want to play around risk-free, you can try one of the many simulators online that follow the actual stock market, like Investopedia's Stock Simulator. Or you can watch experts and novices alike live stream their day trading on YouTube. Some are pretty engaging and will answer a lot of questions that come their way. Regardless of how you approach trading stocks, be careful and prepare for heartbreak when you do lose money. But possibly more important is to be patient and let investments grow. If you look at your investment an hour, day, week, or a month later, it may be in the red, but that doesn't mean you should react necessarily. Growth takes time, but also you should do your own research and make sure you're investing into a stock symbol, company, or whatever it is that you know something about. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Frugal Noodle. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay up to date on the latest episodes, and follow the show on social media. Links are in the show notes below. The music for this episode was produced by CARBS. Again, thank you for listening.